we're back.
Hurrah.
Hurrah. Thank you for coming along, Helen. Really appreciate it. I know you're really busy. But I always like to start off with kind of like your journey, kind of like if you give us a short synopsis, if that's okay, as regards to when you entered education and then the different roles that you've had, and I guess then the roles that you do now. Give people a bit of a background. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Go for it.
Started way back in 1986 when I qualified as a primary teacher. So I taught 6 and 7-year-olds as my first job. And I thought, I wonder what's happened before for them to get to the point where they understand things or they don't. So then I moved down to teaching 5s. And then I thought, what's happened before? Why don't they understand this? Why do some do? So then I went into nursery, 3.5 to 5s. That's my passion, absolute passion. Did that until I was 40, then thought I'm going to have to move because I'm going to get too old or too expensive to move. So I went into FE and I taught teaching assistants how to teach. So that was lovely. And then I moved into higher education and I've been there now for 16 years.
Oh, wow.
So my job now is I was a program leader for an undergraduate program that was placement based, and you gave my students amazing placement opportunities. Thank you, Nathan. And now I actually teach new academics into the university how to teach.
Oh, okay. Are you enjoying it?
Love it. Love every moment. And I have to say that in terms of the 3.5 to 5s to working with adults, they're just bigger. It's the same characters. They're just bigger and louder. Big characters.
Big characters. And we're back. So would it be okay if we could just reel back the clock a bit, if that's all right? I know you've had a few different roles and stuff like that, been in education a good while, but a question I like to ask everybody, what made you decide to be a teacher? How was that process? And we spoke about it in the past where we have connections and people say, ask you questionnaires and stuff like that. Did somebody inspire you? How did that become your path?
Do you know what?
Oh.
It actually started when I was about 3.5.
No way.
Yes. And my father was a missionary in Belize. And I went to school there. And my first report was, Helen needs to concentrate on what she's doing and not helping everybody else. So I've always loved doing that. And I always knew that that's what I wanted to do. Yes, I had inspirational teachers along the way that just vindicated really that that's what I wanted to do.
Okay. And then your steps to become a teacher. So did you go to sixth form?
I did go to, I did A-levels. Mm-hmm. And then I went to teacher training college in Lincoln, Bishop Gustet, which was fabulous. But all the way through, when you had to do work experience and things like that, I always went into school. So it was always confirming the fact that that's what I wanted to do. So initially, I was going to do geography at Newcastle and become a geography teacher, secondary teacher. But I didn't get the results. So I went to teacher training college and then did primary. Best move ever.
Yeah. I was going to ask you that because I love asking teachers what made you do primary instead of secondary. And that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the reason that I considered secondary was that I was passionate about geography. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to pursue that for me. Mm. And then I thought, well, then I can use it in teaching. Mm-hmm. Then when I went to teacher training college for primary, mm-hmm. I realised you can still pursue your own subject mm-hmm. and your own, learning, but then to actually work with children, mm-hmm. primary age range, amazing.
So what you're referring to here is, for example, you can be like geography coordinator.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can still say, I love geography, that's my passion.
Yeah, and if you think about primary, they often say you're a jack of all trades because you have to teach every subject. So you can still get your passion in, mm-hmm. but then you've also got to teach, dance mm-hmm. and English and maths and everything.
I do think that is always worth remembering to people that don't teach. I mean, my partner's a teacher, my brother-in-law's a teacher, I've got lots of friends and other family members that are teachers too. But what gets me about primary specifically is the fact that you've got to know English to a certain level, maths to a certain level, science to a certain level. And then on top, like you say, on top of that, geography, history, RE, and keep up to date as well.
And it's not only at the level, you've got to know what comes before and what comes after. Because if you've got children and young people who don't understand concepts that they're meant to at their developmental level, you've got to know how to step it down. If you've got children that have had loads of experience and that's their passion, you've got to stretch them. So you've got to be, it's called adaptive teaching now. We used to call it differentiation and quality teaching. So you've got to know what comes before and what comes, after as well. Now,
I'm jumping around a little bit, but what's coming to my mind is what a lot of feedback's been over for the past few years is, I'm going to mention the word COVID, because there's been gaps and it's affected all children in different ways.
Yeah.
And for example, someone was talking to me when I was first having these type of conversations, when children are first entering, let's say, Key Stage 1, none of them have done EYFS. For example, they've just been at home. So, like you've just said, what I want to ask you is, do you think so much adaptive teaching would have had to have been
Absolutely.
more than ever because of COVID?
Yes, because depending on their home environment would depend on how many times they were spoken to, what they were spoken to about. So absolutely. And the schools, because a lot of schools did a lot of really good online work, but then some schools didn't do as much. So you've got big gaps in knowledge. And I think the language is what's been affected the most, and the social and emotional skills. So that social anxiety of actually coming into a room with other people, working and talking with other people, that's been a huge thing that all teachers have had to take into consideration. Even at university, we noticed that their ability to work and talk to each other we had to work really hard to get them confident enough to do that again.
It's almost like we went online and it's like you tried to unpick it almost. Like, as much as it's great now, we've got all these tools that probably most of them were already there. We just didn't use them as much. It's like saying, but now we need to interact.
Yes.
We need to have the human interaction again.
Yes.
And almost relearn it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that's really important, because I think we were going on, using technology so much that I think we'd lost the focus on, we are humans, we need to interact, we need to socialise, for well-being and everything else. And I think we'd lost that because we're going so much on the line of technology. AI, that's the new thing coming in, but actually that can be used for good. And, but it's another tool. I don't think we can ever get away from the most important tool is being able to sit down and talk to somebody.
Yeah, and school starts that journey of teaching you how to interact with others.
Yes, yeah.
But if you're not at school,
you're
not learning that, because you do learn it at home, but you learn a different way. There's a different hierarchy at home. There's different people that are in charge. There's different, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's good cop, bad cop, etc. School kind of teaches you hierarchy, it teaches you to get on with other people and everything else, and instills values and community feel and empathy. And not saying you don't learn these things at home, which you do, but school kind of reinforces it.
Yeah, it does, definitely.
It's the biggest, because you're there so much. You're there more than you're at home, aren't you? Waking hours wise, you're at school more than you were at home when you were little.
And I think the school is the consistent. That's why it's so important. And because, not everybody will have a good cop, bad cop at home. They might just have a bad cop all the time. And so the impact on that young person is huge. So school gives them that sense of that there is an alternative. It doesn't have to be like this. I don't have to be shouty because I'm shouted at. Other people will treat me differently.
Okay. How intense was your training to be a teacher? Because people are probably interested in hearing about that.
4 years. Mine was 4 years because it was called a BEd Honours. Okay. And it was fabulous because throughout you had teaching practices in different locations. So because it was Lincoln, we did very rural schools. Then we did city schools in Grantham, town schools. So you really got the breadth of experience, because working in a very rural, tiny school with like a mixed phase class is totally different to working in an inner city school. So it is intense and it is placement based, but that's the job you're going into. You should love it because, and you're learning the theory about how to manage behaviours and things like that. So you're not going in cold. You first of all, you're given support and strategies, then you go in and practice, which is really good. And you can make mistakes because you're scaffolded. You're not on your own. You've still got the class teacher who is actually scaffolding your learning and pointing out that, you know, perhaps don't do that in PE next time because that little boy did a backflip off a vault onto a mat. Maybe put a little bit more boundaries in. But you've got that support there. So you can make mistakes, but with somebody who can put those right so that they're not, you know, catastrophic for the child.
And is that still how well, I don't know if you're involved in that or not, but if you could pass a comment, but is that still how it's taught now? You still, you know, get that type of support now, and you've got, you know, I know you get mentors, don't you?
Yes.
So for those people that want to be a teacher out there, it's not just here's a class, off you go.
No.
You know,
I think it depends on the route. So I think if you think about if you do a PGCE, that's 1 year. So you do your subject and then you train to be a teacher. That's a lot. And that's intense in 1 year. But if you do like the BEd route, then you're actually getting the training on the job. I think, to be honest, and this is my opinion, a lot of it is on assessment and planning now and how to do that. Whereas back in the day when I did it, it was about the child. Where was the child and what did the child need? Not they need to be on this page in this textbook because they're this age.
And what was it like when you got your first class? And what made you choose? Did you choose the older ones to begin with? Was that your mindset? I want to teach, I don't know, year 5, year 6, and then you kind of gradually wanted to experience below. But how did you pick your year groups? There's so many year groups in primary.
Absolutely. Well, my specialism was 3 to 7.
Okay.
So because you could specialise. So I started off with 7s. I don't know why, actually. I think, thinking back, what happened was when you had qualified, you chose the area that you wanted to teach in, and mine was in Nottingham. Then you had a pool of head teachers who would come and interview you. And then if you were successful, they'd say, I've got a class of 6, 7-year-olds. Would you like it? And it was like, yeah. Thanks. But the first morning when they're all sitting on the carpet, eyes looking at you, you just have this moment of abject terror thinking, oh my word, they're all looking at me. But then you love it.
They are funny. They can say random things. You got to be ready for that. Kids are funny.
But I think that's why 3.5 to 5s are my favourite. There's no filter. It's whatever comes in their head comes out their mouth. They're not thinking, is it going to impress? Is it going to, am I saying the right thing? It's just out there.
Yeah. What did you enjoy the most about, I guess, teaching at primary level?
Seeing children develop their characters, their idiosyncrasies, their loves, and giving them the confidence in areas that they weren't as confident in, and seeing that develop. It's seeing the person as a whole moving forward in every way. That it's just joyous. And to think that you've had a part in that is amazing.
And when you moved down the year groups and you ended up in EYFS, how important are those early stages of development for children? And I'm going to double up the question here, which I like to ask people from an EYFS background. It winds some people up sometimes. But is it all play? And how important is play?
Oh,
there you go.
Well, you've just asked my favourite question, Nathan, because my favourite answer is from Susan Isaacs, who says, play is a child's work. You learn through play. It isn't. People have the wrong opinion of the EYFS. And that's why I moved down to EYFS, because I knew that children were struggling at 6 because they hadn't been taught properly for them key concepts at 3. So if they, people would say to me, oh, well, my child can count. They can count to 10. That's memory. That's not knowing the numberness of number. So what makes 2 2 rather than 3? So all of that is absolutely fundamental to get right in the EYFS. And if they get those foundations of learning right, all maths, I believe, is based on if they've got a secure understanding of number bonds to 10. Okay. So, and everything builds on that understanding. Mm-hmm. So if you get those things right there, then the higher order concepts can be laid on a really solid foundation. If they don't really understand it, if it's not sticky learning, if it's something that, they do one day, oh, you've done it, we'll move on to the next, and they haven't really got it, when you try to layer new knowledge and concepts on top, just falls away. They don't get it. And then we see them as failing, whereas actually we should say, we failed them. Why don't they? Why can't they build that knowledge? Why is that foundation not secure? So for me, that's the beauty of the EYFS. You learn through play because play is problem solving. It's being creative. It's trial and error. If my tower falls down, why is it fallen down? It's because actually my base isn't big enough. And if the philosophy of the EYFS, learning through play, learning through context, not concepts, if that was actually embedded into Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2 and secondary, you'd have a lot more successful learners.
What do you mean by that concept? Let's say, how would you express that in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2?
I would give them a problem to solve. So if it was maths or if it was geography and you're doing volcanoes, build a volcano, look at the videos and things like that, not just telling them things, getting them to work things out and to make the connections and making connections between subjects, not teaching subjects in isolation. So, maths, okay, if you're going to go to the tuck shop, if we're going to develop a tuck shop or set one up, although you can't do that now in schools because of, healthy eating. Don't get me started on that. Everything is healthy moderation, even a deep fried Mars bar. If you have it once in a lifetime, that's fine.
Is it good?
I don't know. I've never had one, but I will do now. I'll make sure I do. But it's making the learning have a purpose. Because if learning has a purpose, they'll engage with it. If they can see the point, because people say, well, I'm never going to use angles and, so Cartoa again. But if you think of a football field, if you're taking a corner, you've got to know where you need to get the ball for somebody to head it into the net. So for me, if you can make the learning contextual and purposeful, they're going to want to learn it. If they don't see the point, so RE, what is the point of RE? Well, actually, Steiner would say it's about learning about spiritualism and that side of life. So different people believe different things, have different values. And if you don't explore that, how do you know where your values sit and what they are? And then you can become, I think you become more tolerant and more empathetic because you understand that people have totally different belief systems to you, but they are as valid as what you believe.
Yeah. It's like not understanding why you're learning a topic like history and just being told to read text rather than learning the importance of where your rights come from.
Yeah, exactly.
People's fought for your freedom.
Yeah.
For example, Remembrance Day has just been.
Yeah.
To me, go to a Remembrance Day event, and really be evoked by the emotions.
Absolutely.
Meet some of the veterans.
Yeah. But again, there's a saying that history is the key to the future. If you don't understand what's happened in the past, you don't understand why we are now, where we are now, and what we can do. And looking at some of the mistakes in the past, if we didn't think about that, then we would be in a different place now.
What you're reminding me of is a conversation I've had with two different people. One, it was, something you'll know, for example, I'm going to bring it back to something else and we'll come back to that. And you'll know why in a moment, is it seems to be a common theme what you're talking about in SEN, focusing on a child's interest rather than specifically always their need and the outcomes of the lesson and what the lesson is.
Yeah.
For example, someone mentioned the other day, if someone's into Spider-Man, let's adapt everything to Spider-Man because they're going to get engaged.
Yes.
And they'll learn without knowing that they're learning.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a way of getting, you know, they may only be interested in Spider-Man because obviously a lot of children with special needs have a certain way of thinking about things, you know. I'm not a professional in that. I'm repeating what I've been told. And so that's a good example. I think SEN schools kind of do that a lot and focus on how to get this child interested in what they're doing and stuff like that. But what I wanted, that's one thing. And then, which I think is amazing. And then the other thing was, one gentleman said he worked in an SEN school and the children really weren't getting involved in food tech, for example. And he said, right, I wanted to see if we can do this a different way. Let's get them involved. Let's make menus. Let's create a postal order and let's put a hat on the child and they can go around taking everyone's order. And he said we did maths at the same time because you had to count, not high numbers, you know, this, that, and the other. They had responsibility. They had to interact with other people, which they didn't realise we were actually getting them to interact. They went to each class and took orders, which is a big thing. And then somebody, you know, they had to dress up and someone said, oh, don't get them to wear a hat because they won't wear it. He said they were fighting to wear the hat. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So he was adapting the lesson. You know, he got them involved in the kitchen with the kitchen staff, and also some of them made coffees or whatever it was. And he was just.
But again, they're learning about volume and measurements because how much coffee do I put in to make it the right? Yeah.
And one yesterday, and the reason why you've got me going is because of how you're passionate about it. I'm like, I want to tell you what some people have told me about it. But there was yesterday, I did a podcast with a lady called Sarah, and she was so funny. We were laughing so much. But what you'll really like is she got married at a school, not real married, by the way. And she said, but it helped link in RE.
Yes.
It helped the children all get involved in something. Yes. And, you know, they took it very seriously.
I did that with my 3.5 to 5s.
Did you?
We did a wedding. And we went to the church and the bride and the groom. And then we had a reception afterwards. It was fabulous.
Yeah.
And it was all to do with celebrations. And then we did, you know, different weddings from different faiths. Ooh. So we had people coming in to talk about throwing plates and, you know, putting money on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, brilliant.
Oh, that's cool. And it gets them interested.
I think that's the key.
Yeah. Okay. So that's how you would blend it into other year groups. Okay, fab. For me, when you're in early years, a question I sometimes ask is, what's it like being, you starting off bad cop and you end good cop, in the sense of, a lot of the children have kind of got that fear of going to school. It's a big step. Yeah. Some of them didn't go to nursery. Some did go to nursery. Some of them, you know, maybe it's a nursery at school, whatever. But there's a lot of emotions, and you're dealing with parents' emotions, maybe not wanting to let go of the children and stuff like that. And how is that to navigate? Like, you know, and I'm going to tell an honest story here. I remember, and I'm not going to name and shame the head teacher, but if you come from Chellaston, you know what I'm talking about. She's no longer a teacher, but I used to get my ear pulled or grabbed my shoulder and pinched and pulled into school when I was going to infants. Yeah. I remember it like yesterday. Yeah.
Well, I think it's being empathetic, it's understanding that the parents are going to be nervous. And I remember, even having been a teacher for a long time, I became a much better teacher when I'd had my son, because I could empathise far more. And when I took him for his first day at nursery, I cried all the way back home. So it's like, I understand. So you put things in place to actually allay those fears. So things like home visits. So the child sees you in their home with their mum and whoever, their carer, first. And then they come in for staggered visits. So they're not coming in, the door's closed, I'm not going to see anybody that I know for like 8 hours. You don't do that. They come in for a couple of hours with their carer, they stay, so that they develop that, you know, feeling of security. The best advice I ever got for teaching was from a teacher that I really respected. And she said, be firm and fair. So you can you can always then relax and have a real laugh with whatever age group, because you know you can pull them back. If you go in thinking you're going to be their friend and it's all about fun, learning should be fun, but fun doesn't always equate to learning. And you're all like, then you can't pull them back. So it's that. So it is being warm, approachable, and then the children relax with you, and so do the parents. And again, when they leave them for the first full morning or afternoon in EYFS, ringing them up and saying they're absolutely fine. And obviously you don't hear a screaming child in the background, you're not lying, but it just gives them that sense of, yeah, they're okay and they care about my child. I think that's the most important thing, that they're not seen as one in a class of 30. They actually know my child, know their likes and dislikes, and are being looked after in terms of as a child, not one of.
And talking about having a child, not one of, how you remember every child's name. Is it a difficult trick to learn? Is there tricks to it? Is it name tags or something to begin with for a while so you can call them by the name? But teachers pretty quickly know every single child's name.
I think it's something innate. I think that because I've always been good with names, so I can rock up at a petrol station and a parent come out and I'll remember the parent and remember their child's name from 10 years ago. And they're like, wow, how do you do that? It's just something in my memory. But in terms of students at the university, yes, I get them to wear a name badge or a card, but I also print off my class list. So I've got photographs. And that helps because, again, welcoming, especially I think in, secondary, if you stand at the door and as your class come in and you welcome them by name, it gives them that feeling of belonging and you know me and you care about me. Same at university.
Yeah, no difference.
Makes a huge difference. And they'll, my colleagues, because they are colleagues, will say, how on earth do you remember the names? And I say, well, because I've got your photographs in front of me and that helps.
Oh, you have your colleagues?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a smart
trick.
That
I teach, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Although I do have to put a little bit of caveat on that because sometimes the filters that are used for the photographs bear no resemblance to who I'm actually looking at. And I have to say, there was once when one of my undergraduate students, she's normally very glam, it's absolutely stunning. She came in one day with no makeup and I thought somebody else had come into the class and I nearly asked them if they were in the right room.
And then it clicked.
That clicked. I pulled it back just in time, Nathan.
Oh, that's hilarious. So in EYFS, there's a lot of TAs. Normally more TAs than there would be, let's say, in other classes, unless there's a large amount of children that maybe, let's say, need a one-to-one, which would condone more TAs, let's say, for example. But in EYFS, there's normally more TAs in other year groups.
Yeah.
For people out there that are between minds on how to take their career, do I be a teacher? Do I go to the support side? Because, they're two very different jobs, but equally as important. How important are TAs within EYFS? Well, school full stop.
Massively
important. And what did he do?
Massively important. For me, they are doing a teacher's job, but the responsibilities stop at certain points to differentiate between their role and a teacher's role. They should be working with all of the children, not just because what happens with a lot of TAs in schools is that they're given the lower, term as the lower ability groups. Well, actually, if you think about it, the teacher should be working with those because the teacher has that knowledge of how to drill down as well as drill up. So the TAs are supporting learning just like a teacher. But the difference is the teacher does the planning, the teacher does the marking, the teacher does the assessment and all of that. So the responsibility lies with the teacher. But in terms of the role, a TA has a really important and influential role working with the children because they're supporting learning. So in terms of if you want to find out whether it's for you, being a TA or volunteering is perfect because you'll see what happens in a classroom and what the teacher has to do that's different to a TA. And I think that's the best way to see if it's for you, whether you want the other responsibilities that go with being the class teacher or whether you just want to be able to support learning.
Yeah, and you're involved a lot with the children as well, and a lot of the time as well, you keep in close contact with parents if you're doing a one-to-one, for example. You give them regular updates. You're the bridge between the teacher, the head teacher, the Senko, the parent.
Yeah.
You're involved in this child's development a lot. And when I hear TAs that are so passionate about supporting children, whether it's one-to-one or class, it's just the relationships they build.
Absolutely. It's key.
And a lot of people do go on to be teachers.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's like you say, it's a good gateway.
I think it's fantastic because I think the trouble is we put too much pressure on young people to say, what do you want to be?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you need to rule things out as well as rule things in. You know, I was lucky. I knew what I wanted to be, but a lot of young people have got no idea. And I think they need to try things and see if it's for them. And being a TA is an ideal way of seeing, because you could be passionate about working with children, but with the constraints of the curriculum, assessment, targets, league tables, whatever, you might think, actually, I don't want to be in charge of that. I want to be really working with, you know, one-to-one or small groups and having that real relationship with those children.
And also you can, there's different levels to being a TA. Not many people know that. That may not be in education.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Some people may think, I mean, it's great if you just want to stay at a certain level. It's up to you where you take your career in life. But, you know, schools, especially larger schools as well, or even let's say an SEN school and stuff, will have lots of tiers for their TAs. So you can progress as a TA as well.
Absolutely.
You know, and also you can become, for example, HLTA.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, do you want to discuss about HLTAs?
Yeah, high-level teaching assistants, and you used to be able to do a qualification to get high-level teaching assistant. That's not universal now. There are only pockets in the country that do that. But within a school, the head teachers can decide in terms of the level and the pay grades and things like that. And if you are, because there's a way into teaching from being a TA, because if you have got 2 years of almost being like an unqualified teacher, a TA who's doing a lot of cover, then you can actually go into the assessment only route into teaching.
I didn't know that.
Aha. Yeah, because for 2 years you have been doing the job of a teacher. You might be going into EYFS for PPA cover.
Yeah.
So if you're doing that across the school and you've got that different experience of teaching different levels, but you're not being rewarded for that in terms of your pay, you can do what's called the assessment only route, which is assessing you against the teacher standards. So you're not having to study or train because you're actually doing the job.
You just blow my mind. I don't know if many people know about that. I mean, I'm not in education in that way, so I wouldn't, I guess. But can you just walk me through how somebody would apply for that then? So is it just a simple fact of you just get it signed off? Would you go, sorry, let me read it back. Would you go to your head teacher and say, I'm thinking of becoming a teacher. Can give me, would they need a reference or some sort of documentation? I'm guessing there'll be a lot of stuff behind it.
Yes, there is. I mean, Derby University, for example, you know, offer that route. You have to have a minimum of 2 years experience of teaching as an unqualified teacher. So doing that PPA cover across the board, and has to be enough evidence of how many hours you've done. You have to have a degree. It's not that it's, you know, you have to have that level. And then you apply, you have a letter of recommendation from your head teacher. You have an interview where we have a professional conversation about your experience, what you understand by safeguarding, what's your philosophy of education. It's a professional discussion to make sure that you are meeting all the criteria. Then, because it's an assessment only route, we come in twice to formally observe you, and we're looking at your skill set mapped against the teacher standards. And it's a 12-week program. That's all. But then every week you are having developmental meetings and feedback from your mentor, who would be, you know, somebody who works alongside you. And within that 12 weeks as well, you have to do another school placement. So you have to work across another key stage, because at the end of that 12 weeks, we're signing you off to say you've got qualified teacher status. You could go anywhere and teach.